India today, Anurag, is probably the most vibrant equity market and certainly the most vibrant IPO market globally. The activity levels in India are twice of what they used to be in terms of the share of the global, market. IPOs are obviously something that, we're talking about a lot. And I think India today has seen this year about 14.5, 15 billion of IPO capital raises. But at the same time, we've seen 22, 23 billion of secondary, equity activity as well. And if you put both those together, what that really means is, India is, only second to the US in terms of value of IPOs. It's the leading market ahead of the US in terms of volume of IPOs. It's home to the largest IPO globally this year. It's home to also the largest tech IPO globally this year. And all this points to a very healthy level of activity that we think will continue, into the next 12 months. And as Lightspeed, we're extremely excited about this market environment. And we are encouraging our companies to look at the public markets. And hopefully in the next 12 months, we'll have 4 or 5 of our companies list in India.
So at what stage is the work right now with these 4 or 5 companies for preparing them for a listing?
Look, I think there's different stages of progress. Certainly almost all of them have advisors appointed, and we're in the process of, starting to draft or in the process of drafting documentation. I think there's a lot of other background work in terms of, corporate actions and governance and, financial reporting and accounting that we're working on. So hopefully we're very positive and excited to actually see a wave of IPOs from our Lightspeed India and Southeast Asia portfolio in the next 12 months.
Right. We have also seen pickup in pre-IPO deals happening, and that's something that's picking up. Secondaries, they were not there earlier. They are making a presence now. In terms of the pre-IPO space, what is Lightspeed doing? I mean, what has been your role so far? I mean, are there deals where you have participated ahead of IPOs? Can you, give some kind of color and, elaborate on that?
Sure. I think that's a very important point you bring up, Anurag. I think if you take a step back and see what are the avenues of exits, for companies that are backed by financial institutions like ours. There's obviously the IPO market, which we've talked about. And the interesting thing there, I'll add is that in India, you can actually, as long as you are a profitable company, you're a market leader, you have the right equity story, size is less of a consideration today, versus in India in the past and say some other markets. So that's a very viable exit route. There is the secondary exit route, which historically was dominated by, say, private equity funds or growth funds coming in. What's been very interesting, development over the last 12, 18 months has been pre-IPO funds, family offices, high net worth individuals wanting to get a piece of some of the unlisted companies. And that's happening very actively, in companies from, say, 6 months prior to IPO to up to 2 years prior to IPO. Right. Which is an additional and a new pool of capital that is accessible to our companies. And we at Lightspeed are engaging with, several investors in this bucket to see if, they can come into our cap tables and offer liquidity, to us and to the companies.
Yeah. And in terms of secondaries too, they are picking up. So what is your outlook on secondaries and particularly continuation funds? Are you working on setting up such a fund in India?
Yeah, look, I think secondaries, both direct as well as structured solutions, are definitely on the rise. I think, if I go back to the stats I gave you, from the 55 billion of equity capital markets activity in India this year, I think 23, 24 billion has actually been secondaries. That's obviously on the public side. On the private side as well, there's been a very robust secondary market. This is obviously direct secondaries in individual companies. I think you correctly pointed out there is an increasing trend of structured solutions whereby, either early investors or VC or private equity investors are selling a bunch of assets together. That can take the shape of a continuity vehicle. It can take the shape of a basket portfolio sale. I think both those trends are on the rise. The market, look, in India and Asia is not that deep, but it is an increasingly growing market and one that is catching attention. And look, us and I'm sure a lot of other early stage funds are sort of looking at that market actively to see if there could be opportunities.
Yeah, secondaries are a fledgling side of the market, but are they imparting enough liquidity to unlisted equity right now? Especially, you mentioned that pre-IPO deals are on the rise. So are we seeing better liquidity for unlisted securities for companies?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's many pockets, as I mentioned. I think there's the traditional sort of growth and private equity or sovereign funds that can offer early stage investors liquidity. There's the global sort of crossover funds. Obviously that activity has decreased, but then there is increasing amount of pre-IPO funds that are offering liquidity. So I think liquidity is not really a consideration for private companies as we see it today.
Right. How do you see the deal climate into 2025? You see that further improving. You see the number of deals increasing because you have the IPO market which is booming right now. You see secondaries which are happening more often. Generally, will that lead to a surge in deals on the ground?
I think so. And we at Lightspeed are extremely positive about the investment climate in India. We have consistently written sort of between say 15 to 20 checks in a year, and that goes back to the sort of 2020-21 period. We've stayed disciplined throughout, and our outlook is to write a similar number of checks going into 2025. And as you correctly said, right, the fundraising, the follow-on fundraising, secondary and IPO environment gives us a lot more confidence that the investments can then be sort of monetized and eventually realize liquidity for ourselves and for our LPs, which is the most important part of our business. So yes, I do expect the level of new investment activity to stay strong and perhaps even pick up going into 2025.
And how do you see the level of corporate governance going ahead, given the fact that more companies are going public now and you work with investee companies? Is there a certain parameter on corporate governance you work with, and what are your expectations?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a good question. I've actually been responsible for designing the corporate governance charter for Lightspeed. We take governance very seriously. We have very sort of strict standards of reporting to our own sort of shareholders, and we expect the same standards to be adhered to by our portfolio companies. Of course, now the way we've designed governance is very fitting to the size of the company, but we're increasingly taking a public market lens to governance, especially for mid to late stage growth companies. It's an extremely important consideration for us, and we take it very seriously.
Great. How do you see private equity companies, venture capital companies, in terms of their deal sizes in next year? You think the ticket sizes are going to rise going into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a function of the capital and the use of proceeds eventually that the companies are looking to raise. I think we've seen deal sizes actually, at least on the early side, sort of normalize a little bit from, both in terms of valuation and in terms of the fundraising from what we saw at the peaks of 2020 and 21. I think the average sort of, check size for us has been sort of fairly consistent because we've stayed very disciplined, all throughout the cycle. And, for us, we don't see a massive change, but ultimately I think, the fundraising activity is a function of the use of proceeds. So if companies see growth opportunities organically and inorganically to grow, they will raise more money, and the good news is there is money available to support that growth.
Yeah, and there's one rapid fire question that 2025, the deal climate, you're optimistic, you're neutral, you're pessimistic.
Extremely optimistic, and we really look forward to investing more. We look forward to realizing certain exits as well, and returning capital to our shareholders. So we are investing out of our sort of fourth fund, and we are extremely excited about the climate going into next year.
Yeah. Any kind of idea you can give about your dry powder at the moment?
We're well into our latest fund that was raised in 2022. So I don't have the exact sort of stats of how much we still have left, but we're deploying very actively behind the right names, and we hope to continue to do that next year.